Around about this time last year, I had the pleasure and the privilege to model for and be interviewed by Speciale, which is a men's and women's bespoke tailors in Notting Hill. The two main men who operate this brilliant business are George Marsh and Bert Hamilton Stubber. They are extremely talented individuals and I have a lot of admiration and respect for what they do. It's quite spectacular walking into their shop at 324 Portobello Road. Every inch of their shop is got something wonderful about it. They design almost all of the furniture and kind of objects that you see inside. They are so passionate and determined to give their work their own creative and independent stamp, and they're incredibly thoughtful and very kind and lovely people. And so we worked together about this time last year, and Bert interviewed me. He wanted to find out a little bit more about my work as a performer with Kabuki and understand a bit more about what my performance practice staging plays inspired by Kabuki involved. So I thought I would read for you the interview that I did with them. And if you do have any thoughts or questions, or if anything comes to your mind as I read, then it would be lovely to hear your thoughts, and hope you enjoy. Suleiman is a London-based theatrical performer who sings and performs in West End theatre and opera, and runs Kabuki Mono, a theatre company he founded to stage Kabuki-inspired performances around the city. Here he tells us about these performances and what inspired his interest in Kabuki. As someone born and raised in London, what drew you towards Kabuki, a Japanese form of theatre little known or performed here? Well, I've always been fascinated since I was a child in performance. My parents worked in the arts, and my dad was a limbo dancer. I remember watching him at Hackney Empire and being in the wings. It was my sister, though, who first started singing in choirs. I wasn't as interested, but I went along to one of her auditions, and everything went from there. I began singing wonderful music like Benjamin Britten, and got that taste for music, for using my voice, and the uplifting power of performance. I soon joined junior opera companies local to me. I got a small part in La Traviata for Holland Park. There in my priest robes, it was an epiphany moment, being backstage, being on stage. I didn't understand the language or the story necessarily, but I could sense that there was something going through me. I just fell in love with the idea of drama and the idea of theatre. When I left school, I went to study drama at Goldsmiths. It was an interesting course, as a lot of it was really quite conceptual. Looking at different forms of drama across history, it gave me an opportunity to dip into different periods and places, I think. In my final year, I went to Salzburg for a term, where the emphasis was much more on the physical side of drama. I was learning acrobatics, and I started learning about Japanese theatre. My dissertation was about that physicality, how actors could use their body as an instrument. Kabuki struck me as an incredibly exciting genre in which to explore that. I loved it stylistically, its costume, pageantry, but also was fascinated by its potential, like opera, as a unifying vehicle for drama, music and dance, and the place in it for physical performance. Suleiman, tell us about Kabuki Mono, your own series of Kabuki shows. Well, after I graduated in 2017, I started digging deeper into Kabuki and went to Paris and Japan to see it live. A year or so later, I founded Kabuki Mono with the idea of creating a series of collaborative performance events that take Kabuki as a loose inspiration. In each show, I perform a script I've written and try and interweave other artists into the performance and evening, like Hibiki Ichikawa, a shamisen musician, as in my most recent performance, or away from the actual stage, non-performance artists like tea masters or cocktail makers. The first event was in 2019 in Ladbroke Hall. It was called The Pearl Diver, a play I'd written inspired by Der Taucher, a Schubert song I'd heard sung at the Edinburgh Festival, and had been blown away by it. It was a heroic story about a boy diving into a treacherous sea to find a crown after being dared by the king for his entertainment and vanity. The second event was in October 2020 at Overseas House in St James's, and was called Kabuki on the Flower Path, in which I took the audience through biographical vignettes in each season in 4 cities: London, Paris, Tokyo, and Kyoto. Seasons are fascinating in Kabuki. They set the narrative mood and are timed for certain events, turns in the narrative, and changes in costume and stage. But that structure also enabled me to split the performance into these discrete, disconnected encounters with Kabuki. It was a way of trying to come at Kabuki very informally and subjectively. The first, Spring, was set in London, with me as an 11-year-old boy walking through Kyoto Gardens, near where I grew up, and imagining going to Sadler's Wells for a Kabuki performance. Summer was an actual trip I took to Bar High Five in Ginza, Tokyo, a famous cocktail bar where I had asked owner Hidetsugu Ueno to make me a Kabuki cocktail. Autumn was recalling another trip to Paris to see 2 Kabuki masters perform. It's custom in Kabuki for audiences to call out to the stage to convey their appreciation. I shouted out, "Matimashita!" meaning, "I've been waiting for this." But being in Paris, no one understood what I was doing. And finally, Winter, which imagined me on the bullet train to Kyoto on my 25th birthday, at the same age as David Bowie when he visited Japan, and visiting the Moss Temple Garden as he did, blanketed in snow. It's interesting, that aspect of your interest in Kabuki, that some of your encounters with it are imagined, and that your impression of it is so subjective and personal, taken from afar. David Bowie was of course another London-born performer who became interested in Kabuki and Japan from afar. Yes, he was. Japan had a profound effect on him, and when he visited the Moss Garden, he was actually moved to tears. The seed was planted in him by Lindsay Kemp, this idea of not just sounding different, but looking different, of thinking of yourself as a physical performer, and performance being multifaceted, with the choice of what you wear and how you move on stage as important as everything else, which Bowie obviously ended up taking to really great places. Bowie worked with the Japanese designer Kansai Yamamoto for Ziggy Stardust, with the famous cape decorated with kanji characters spelling out his name, and the fish belly tights. It was heavily accented with a Kabuki influence, the Cupid red lipstick and the wigs, with the famous red hair, which is taken directly from the big manes the male Aragoto performers wear in Kabuki. He also went and met with Tamasoburo Banda V, a famous Kabuki performer, to learn about how to put on makeup before a show. I just found this fascinating and inspiring that Bowie was interested enough in Japan to go there at his age and seek these people out and incorporate them into his own performances. What about the role of costume in Kabuki? It's very important to the narrative in Kabuki versus Western theatre, where it's closer to scenery dressing. Costume in Kabuki is something really exceptional. What I love firstly about it is the relationship between actors themselves and costume. Of course you have technical staff, but for example, the kumodori, which is the Japanese word for makeup, is applied by the actors themselves, and in a very specific way according to the customs of their Kabuki acting lineage and family. Part of the actor's craft is this makeup. There is also a device which I find very inspiring, which Bowie used, called hikinuki, the process of actor on stage removing one costume to reveal another underneath. He did this during his tour in 1973, and it's done using tailors' basting thread. A person comes on and almost dances with the actor, so there's some synchronicity. A cherry blossom brocade can become scarlet kimono in matter of seconds. It's aesthetically amazing. When I saw that live, even without Japanese language, that alone communicated so much to me, this overflow of sensory beauty. The costumes are very heavy, layers and layers of brocades and silks. They can easily weigh up to 70 kilos, and the wigs weigh a lot as well. I don't know how they dance, but their movement is all the more impactful as a result. Entrances and exits are also very important. To walk across the Hanamichi, which is flower path, actors do it in their full costume, and often will stop to go into a stylized pose. It's peacocking to demonstrate how beautiful and powerful they are through their costume and their movement. There's an amazing sensuality to Kabuki. I'm still so early in my journey with it, but as a performer, it's really just an extraordinary experience.